Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Doctor2Doctor in the Chatroom. We thank you guys for coming back to share this hour with us each Saturday at this time. And we cannot say enough how grateful we are that you take out the time in your Saturday afternoons to come back and to support us, because we cannot do it without you. So much obliged, folks. We thank you. We are gearing up for another great episode of Doctor2Doctor in the Chatroom. I've got my co-host in the chat room, Dr. Nicole West. How are you, Dr. West?
I'm doing well, Dr. Shaw. I'm excited about this very, very important topic. And you called our guest the guru. So I am really, really excited to hear what he can teach us today.
So we were having a few technical difficulties. I hope that is still not the case. I hope you guys can hear me okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. So yeah, we do have the guru. We're gonna talk to him in a moment. We'll get to him in a moment. But first, we want to remind you guys to stay safe and to use those necessary precautions to stay safe, as in wearing your mask and physically distancing yourselves when you can. And when you want to get together and have some fun, just do what you know is right to do to stay safe.
Yes.
We are in the midst of the holiday season, so we know you guys are really wanting to see your family and your friends, and we totally understand that. How's your little one, Dr. West?
He's doing pretty well. He is excited about, Christmas and spending time with family and school being on break. He's excited about that too. So yeah, he's doing a good job. Yeah.
So much of what we discuss on this show is either directly or indirectly aligned with either mental wellness or mental illness. And today is not going to be any different. As I said, we have a guru in the chat room with us today, Mr. Kevin Phipps. We're going to talk about something that has impacted us either directly or indirectly, and that is domestic violence. Although we are a couple of months behind on getting this show on, we still want to get this important information out there. We know that domestic violence is prevalent in every community, and it affects people regardless of age, socioeconomic statuses, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, nationality, all of those things. And so it's according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network that although there has been substantial progress in reducing domestic violence, an average of 20 people are physically abused by intimate partners every minute. This equates to more than 10 million abuse victims annually. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been physically abused by an intimate partner, and 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men have been severely physically abused by an intimate partner. Millions of Americans live in daily silent fear within their own homes. In addition, every year, millions of children are exposed to domestic violence. Domestic violence incidents affect every person within a home and can have a long-lasting negative impact on children's emotional well-being. And you know that all too well, Dr. West, as well as their social and academic functioning. So we have the person in the chat room that has his own experience with domestic violence, and he has used that experience and every platform possible to share his story and to bring an awareness to what I consider an epidemic in this country. How are you doing, Mr. Phipps?
I'm doing well. How are you all doing?
Well, we're glad to have you back on the show. Dr. West wasn't here when you were here before, but so glad to have you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you just tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll just kind of dive into some questions and share with the audience.
Okay, my name is Kevin Phipps Sr. I am currently the Public Information Officer for the Shelby County Criminal Court Clerk Office, Clerk Heidi Kuhn. I've been in this position 3 years prior to working in the Criminal Court Clerk's Office. I worked at Shelby County Correction Center as well as pretrial service, where I worked in programs, and I was responsible for doing the groups, and one of the groups happened to be domestic violence group as well as anger management and parenting. So my background is in doing groups, so that's what I enjoy doing. And even though I'm not in that capacity now, I still utilize my voice and get out and speak on various platforms when it comes to domestic violence. And it's amazing that when I speak on it, because people don't put domestic violence and men together, they don't associate a man being a victim.
That's very true. So that kind of is a good segue into what I wanted to ask you to talk about first of all, what it is, okay, and what it looks like. Okay. Because I think that we do typically think it's women being abused. Yeah. And it's not necessarily so. And it's not necessarily always physical abuse. So just give us a good, I won't say define it, but just break down for us and for the audience what it looks like.
Well, in my situation, mine started off more verbally. And, we know people can say harsh words that, words hurt. I don't care what nobody say. And mine were more verbally and more emotional. Yeah. So, and then it got to the point where it went from verbal and emotional to it got physical. And the way I was raised, because I have a sister, and my father, he just was a stickler. A man don't put his hand on a woman. And let me go back that not only, whether is it physical, but I tell people I was a trained fighter. So imagine somebody hitting you, and anybody know in the boxing ring, when you get hit, you are taught to what? Hit back, right? Because defend, we always say duck and move and swing. So, but those things that happened with me, never did see it coming. And I know that in relationships, people have disagreements and arguments and stuff like that, but I never did. And when it first happened, I kind of ignored it. I swept it under the rug. I was like, well, she's going through something. She just a little, men we say she just a little crazy. It'll be okay. So I mean, but what we don't realize that that a lot of times that people will say we just a little crazy, and hey, and it escalates to another level. So it had got to a point where after several hidden beatings, I just had to leave it alone, because I'm not a punching bag, and I'm not going to punch nobody, especially no woman. I wouldn't talk that though. But it started out, it was more verbally for a while. I tell you, I have people laughing all the time. I called everything but my name, and I started answering to when been calling the MF and the B word and all that stuff, but and I'm the type of person, for those who know me, I'm a peacemaker, and I try to do any and everything to make it happen, but it got to the point where it wasn't healthy for me, put it that way.
Yeah.
When it started affecting my health, it's not good. And I can remember when the police was called one time, and the officer said, "You can't control this situation." So I told the male police officer, this was back in the 90s too. I said, "Sir, I'm a trained fighter. So if I control the situation, you all would have came back when it had that white van." So, but I'm also, but I'm a stickler how I was raised, especially with my dad. And my dad always taught you treat that woman like a queen.
Wow. And I think it's so interesting that you bring up the verbal abuse, because that's typically how it starts for a lot of people. You meet somebody and they seem like everything you want them to be, and they typically don't go straight to the physical violence. They go to the verbal and just kind of see how much they can get away with and see how much they can do. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very personal story. And I think, Dr. Shaw, what you said earlier, we don't typically think about men in this situation. When we hear domestic violence, we think women are the only ones who can go through it. So I really appreciate your perspective, because it might help some other man who's going through it feel comfortable enough admitting it.
Yeah,
So,
that's
so
one thing.
is domestic violence with women, with men rather, with men, as easily recognizable as it is with women? I mean, women, can put the makeup on and hide the bruises and the scars. Typically, do people figure it out with men if they don't speak up?
Not really. And then with me and what I did was I didn't come around people. So, then a couple of my friends started noticing because well, he's not really coming around like he used to. So, and men at that time really didn't have a so-called group to be able to voice
Mm-hmm.
to talk about this. Is and I'm gonna be honest, you're not gonna see a bunch of guys in the barbershop talking about domestic violence, especially if they, being abused. That's our kind of like safe haven in the barbershop. I always tell people, you want to hear some good stories, go in the barbershop. But we're not gonna sit there and we're not gonna
Mm-hmm.
tell that information in a barbershop setting. So,
Yeah.
it because think about it. As men, we're taught to be what? Strong, not weak.
Yeah.
We're taught to be, you can't look at yourself as the weaker person. We are taught that's in, to be strong. So, and like I said, when I finally, start coming out and talking about it, and it was actually a woman that actually invited me into a group to say, Kevin, look, you need to talk about it and then when I started talking about it, it just went from there. And then other men started coming. I was, dealing with, but the groups are real small. Yeah. So it was maybe about 5 or 6 guys. And a matter of fact, I was the first man on the Memphis Shelby County Domestic Violence Board here back in, it was 2004. So, I was one of the first elected officials on, being on that board because it was mostly women on that board. So, and when I was going to those meetings, it's amazing. We, men get abused, and at that time, there was only one domestic violence shelter in the United States for men, and the reason being because they feel like if a man is abused, he could go sleep on one of his partner's couch. Think about it. So
Mm-hmm.
now they even have shelters for men now. They even have one here in Memphis. They even have a place here in Memphis for them. So, but it was just uncommon. They say if a man goes through something, he can go lay on one of his partner's couch or sleep in his car, and that's the theory that they had.
Wow. Wow. How invalidating of a response is that for men going through this? Like
Yeah.
you don't get to have your experience feel important to you because of your gender, right?
Yeah.
Like that's wow.
So if I was living in Connecticut and didn't know anybody, and I was in that situation, didn't have any friends, so
Right.
what my option would be very limited.
Yeah.
No options well, I don't know about, but at that time, my option would have been zero at that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So I gave some statistics when we started the show.
Okay.
But how often are men abused by women rather than their same-sex partners? Because we're in a whole different
Yes.
realm of or
Yeah.
environment now in
Yeah.
society, and we have a
Yeah.
lot of same-sex relationships, and so we know that
Yeah.
happens as well. But how often
Yeah.
is it that the women are abusing the men versus men abusing men?
Well, and we can only go by the numbers that are reported because men don't report it. I'm just gonna be honest with you.
Yeah.
Men gonna report. Those numbers are real low. Maybe 1 in every 100 or something like that. I mean, it's that low. But you made a valid point. Now, that same thing about men, but the same sex abuse is high. You know, because
Mhm.
I remember doing groups, and I had men who were in relationship with other men. So I had a lot of those men in the group.
Mhm.
They, you know, that same sex partner, they're reported, but the heterosexual male, you know, if he reported it, when the police come out, the first thing, man, well, no, don't take her to jail, man. We can work it out. That's what they're going to say. Or, and even in some instances, they'll go to jail.
Wow.
So how does domestic violence usually begin? I know with like molestation and all of that, there's usually a grooming process. Is there something similar with
Yeah.
domestic violence, or does it just, as Dr. West said, you know, things are just hunky dory and then boom, one day I'm here.
No, it's a process, and a lot of times, you think about it, we ignore signs every day in different situations.
Yeah.
And you be like, well, I didn't see that coming. Well, you know, today he just stole $1, but the next week he stole $3, and it goes the same way with domestic violence. It can start off verbally, and with men being the abuser, the biggest thing that they do with in abusing a woman, it's more become of a economics and isolation, because if I'm an abuser as a man, and I'm abusing this woman, and if she's not working, I'm going to take what I call the financial stability of what, you know,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to give you this. So, and then that's one of the reasons why some women don't leave, because that man is the sole provider. So
Right.
she can't leave because he is taking care of, you know, X, Y, Z. So, and then when I was talking with the women who was involved in domestic, that was their main concern. Where I couldn't leave because I had no economic means. So
Right.
now I had a man that's abusing me, plus he's the provider. So if I leave and he's providing, where can I maintain the same lifestyle? So I
Right.
mean, it's
You bring up a good point. It's not always physical violence. Sometimes it's emotional abuse. Sometimes it's financial abuse.
yeah,
And sometimes in relationships, you experience all types of abuse. It's all about control. So thank you for making that apparent as well.
that's the power and control wheel. That's what I used to teach. And then isolation is the biggest part, because if I'm gonna take you away from your friends, because if Dr. Shaw started noticing something about you, Dr. West, and hey, he's Johnny is doing this to Dr. West, and you and Dr. Shaw used to go out every Friday. You know, that Friday come to maybe one every 6 months. So that's the way the abuser does that. He
Yeah.
isolate the victim from people that they're close to.
Right. You mentioned something about the power wheel. I want to talk about that, but I think we need to take a quick break.
Okay.
So if we can pick up there on the other side, that would be great.
Okay.
We'll be right back on 94.7 FM.
And we are back. Thank you for sticking around with us here on Doctor2Doctor in the chat room. We are talking about domestic violence and any other kind of abuse that women and men might encounter in relationships. And so before the break, we were talking a little bit about isolation, and that being one of the ways that a man or a woman can start to take the relationship in a direction that might ultimately end up to be unhealthy, getting you away from your family, away from your friends, so that you don't have as much support. And you had mentioned something before the break called the power and control wheel.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Well, in the power and control wheel, it's a wheel that the abuser used, and I just use for an example. In the power and control wheel, we talk about isolation. That's one of the I said things that the abuser uses. Isolate the victim from family, friends, people that the victim would normally talk to, who may have a good relationship with. Because if I use isolation, because I wouldn't want you to, you know, talk to somebody. Hey, you don't need to know what's going on in my house. So that's
Mm,
one of the ways that the abuser would do. Also, we talk about economic abuse, because uh, in some instances, the abuser is the sole financial supporter of the family.
mhm.
So you can't go nowhere because I'm taking care of you. I'm getting your nails done. I'm getting your hair done. You don't work. everything that you need, you have to come through me. So that's what we call economic abuse, and then we talk about verbal abuse. So then in the verbal abuse, I'm gonna belittle you. I'm gonna talk about you.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the verbal to the emotion. So once I talk about you, I'm gonna tear you down to make you think that you're less stuff. So, and those are some of the things that abusers use, and that's why we call the power and control wheel, because and it's different reasons why. I mean, different things that the abuser do. You know, a lot of times, and I tell you, emotional abuse is one of the worst abuse that you can do. You know, you could make a person just real feel bad. You know, that self-esteem. You can make it so bad that hey, you know, they don't care anything about themselves because my abuser say I'm this and that. You know, you're ugly, you can't cook. I mean, these are some of the, and it's when they're teaching the group, and those are some of the things that the men would say to the women. But in that power and control wheel. And believe it or not, the women did the same thing. The women abusers,
Wow.
because they don't
So,
think a man
so
will have.
yeah,
Yeah.
so many times we hear stories where women stay, you know, and for
Yeah.
some of the reasons that, you know, that you've mentioned already. Do men that are being abused typically stay?
Yes. And the reason being, think about if they have kids, you know, and they try to. You've heard people be in a relationship. Well, I'm gonna stay for the kids. You know, I want to stay because I want the kids to have a 2-parent. But what good, you know? And I tell anybody, if you can work on that, that's fine. But if it's unhealthy for you, so you can you imagine what the child is going through?
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And children, believe it or not, kids, they know a lot what's going on.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
They may not be able to verbalize it, but
Yes.
they understand tension, they understand friction,
Yeah.
they know when things are not healthy. I remember, you know, my parents split up when I was in third grade,
Hmm.
and I remember it being such a relief because their relationship was so unhealthy. And you know, as a parent, you think, well, if we break up the family, the child's going to be devastated. But in my case, I was like, thank you all. Thank you for doing this, because I just got tired of the arguments and, you know,
Yeah.
all the ugliness. I was so relieved. I didn't know it because I was only in third grade at the time, but as I matured, I realized that was a relief for me. And if they had stayed together, oh Lord, it just would have been a mess.
When I was in
When I was
when I was in elementary school, I used to ride to school with one of the neighbors, and their husband and wife argued I've never heard them get up and say, "Good morning, man, I fix you breakfast." And that man and woman argued, and what's crazy, the woman used to jump on the man
Mm,
before we would go to school. I was like, you know, I'm watching a fight before I go to school, you
wow.
know, and it was crazy, you know. So just, I mean, that went on for years. They end up getting divorced, but they end up remarrying. But you know, that played a effect on the child's life.
Hmm.
So Kevin, and I'm just gonna call you Kevin. We just Rhonda and Kevin, okay?
Okay. All
Tied
right.
on formalities. So what about the people that don't want to stay? And probably in the more severe situations, do they have to create a safety plan to get out? How do they get out and
Yes.
remain safe and alive?
And so a safety plan is important. And let me say that because even though they're trying to get out, they just can't leave overnight.
Hmm.
So, and I tell people, sometimes people drop nuggets on you don't know. They may leave you a little note and say something, you know, what's going on in my house. And that's your segue of pulling that person to the side, talking to them, and trying to, you know, if don't talk about it, if you're not gonna help them, don't talk about them, assist them, you know, because a
Hmm.
lot of times, you know, people they're afraid to leave, and especially you think about it, Dr. Shaw, when you have kids, you know, so what's the next move for me and my kids? So creating a safety plan is now, you know, tell people get your documents together, so when you get ready to leave, make sure that you have everything from birth certificates or your information banking. When you get ready to leave, you leave, so you won't have to go back to that situation. And then have it planned out. You have somewhere to go, whether it's through a DV shelter here, you know, wherever you live, or to a friend house. And then once you get there, please don't let it, keep it quiet, put it that way.
Yeah.
Because,
Mhm.
we a lot of times people, they'll tell.
Can't
you
be
can tell
going out
somebody,
live on Facebook and all that,
yeah,
like we
yeah,
like
no,
to
you
do.
can't
We
be
like to
doing
tell
that.
everything.
Yeah. And you have to be careful who you tell what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
They always say, never let people know your next move.
Mhm.
Are there domestic violence shelter caseworkers, or let's say you have a woman or a man in a situation right now that's listening and they're like,
Yeah.
I need one of these safety plans. How would they go about getting one? Do they call a domestic violence shelter and get
Yeah,
assigned to somebody, or how does that work?
yeah, you can contact the Family Safety Center. Well, I'm just talking about in Memphis. I don't know the number right offhand, and you can contact the Memphis YWCA. So those are two places that I know of right now that would assist in that matter. And Marquita Jones is the executive director with the YWCA. So very good friend of mine, and she is very helpful and very resourceful.
Okay. Family
So,
Safety Center of Memphis. Oh, sorry, Dr. Shaw.
mm-mm.
Their phone number is 901-222-4400. I just wanted
Yeah.
to put that out there.
So these safety plans, though, they're pretty customized, I think, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like if I'm in a situation, my situation is not necessarily like yours.
Yeah.
So the things that I need to do to get out safely
Yeah.
may look differently from what you need to do. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And everybody's situation is different because you know, you might have to leave Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to leave wherever, sometimes
Yeah.
getting out of your hometown is best because, you staying in your same location, somebody that would probably know that abuser and come back. We've had incidents where, here in Memphis at one time, I don't know if you recall when the nurse that was killed on the job, So, I mean, and it's dangerous.
Yeah. I remember hearing a story about a woman who called 911 and she pretended to order a pizza because her
Mm-hmm.
abuser was
Yeah.
in earshot.
Yeah.
And the 911 operator luckily caught on to what was happening and
Yeah.
sent that woman some help without the woman having to come out and actually say
Yeah.
she was being abused, and who knows what would have happened if he would have heard and
Yeah.
she was on the phone with the police. But
Yeah.
it's just things like that I'm glad there's so much awareness and we have a long way to go, but I'm glad that there are people out there who really do listen for what they need to listen for in order to get people help.
Yes.
I was at the doctor's office the other day and they asked a question, when you go do just a routine physical and they're asking you all kinds of questions. One of them was, are you safe at home?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's amazing, because if I wasn't safe at home and they didn't ask me that, I probably would not have told them. So it's great, that the awareness that we have now.
And I think doctors are getting more trained trying to recognize this. You talking
Most
about
definitely.
and you could talk even the people in the airlines. I had a lady that was getting abused and she left a note in the restroom, and the airline stewards, somebody picked up on it, and she was on the plane with the abuser. So that was able to stop that. Yeah. Think about it. It's and we have to be innovative how we do things now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say is maybe similar about abusers, or is there anything that you have found that they have in common with each other? Similar stories, similar backgrounds?
Yeah. It's most abusers was taught. It was a learned behavior.
Yeah.
I had a great uncle that at 9 years old that told me that a woman needs a whooping at least once a year, whether she did something or not. So
Jesus.
yeah, this was whether he was from, one of my great uncles, and I hate to say this, my great uncle died, and he died alone because but that's was his theory. He's like, you whoop that woman once a year, whether she did something or not, and that's the way you control her. So think about it. It's just like, it's like you do horses. You train the horse to
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was his theory. So most abusers, believe it or not, most of the guys that I taught in the class, it was something that they saw in home, or their uncles or brothers told them, hey, this is what you do. This is how you control that woman. You know,
Mhm.
she needs to shut up. You know, you sometimes, and I've heard men say, you know, every now and then you might need to shake her. Don't hit her, but just grab her by the arm. I'm serious. That's
Ooh,
a that is a you know. So you just grab her by the arm and just shake her a little bit, put a little fear in her.
that is so crazy.
Yeah.
Let's talk
And
about this. Let's, you know, in our world, I think in all three of our worlds, we talk about, you know, it's not what's wrong, but it's what happened. Um, so let's talk about the trauma piece
yeah,
that probably, I mean, yeah, they may have seen it, you know, in some instances, but maybe there are even instances where kids are being beaten and they
yeah,
grow up to be abusers.
yeah. So it was seeing that. That's how you know, people talk. I shared with you, Dr. Shaw, the other day that you know, after getting out of my situation for a while, when I started back dating, when a woman would holler at me, I'd be like, okay, nah, I can't deal with that. You know, that was something in my mind that hey, it it stuck. That if I hear somebody raise their voice or holler at me, and I
Yeah.
kept thinking, so it's gonna elevate to this and this. So, but you know, and for me, see, I went through I went through counseling. You know, people say, well, you're crazy if you go to counseling. Well, to me, it helped out. You're crazy if you don't go. Let me say this.
Yeah.
So that was a big help for me. But so what I'm saying is that these trauma that these kids carry this stuff on from years and years, and they never get the issues addressed because they've seen mom and dad fight. So when they get up and get grown and get in a relationship, that how do I respond? So we have a disagreement. So this is what my daddy did. So this is something that has stuck in
Mhm.
my mind. So you have to, and we have to teach kids that hey, that's not right to do that.
Mhm.
You know, and I didn't see it in my household, but you know, I saw it in one of my neighbor's house, and you know, and I had the crazy uncle, but I was taught by my dad that a man do not hit a woman.
So I
So
think your situation is really unique because you grew up so differently, right?
yeah,
And then you ended up
hmm
in a situation like that.
yeah,
So when, you know, in retrospect, did you see signs? You know, were there clear signs that you ignored?
I I totally ignored it. I did
Mhm.
because let me be honest with you, man. I mean, she's cute. She's got the banging body. You know, she just, me and we are physically attracted first. I'll be honest with you, you know.
Mhm.
So and we just think that, hey, and but not knowing, I had a lady at work said, Kevin, you have to trace the cable because a lot of time, a lot of stuff is because of something what a person past, what they have come from in the past. So now you getting in, they've been in a relationship with somebody, so this is what they've done, and they hadn't cleared that up. So now here I am getting getting abused and all this stuff. So I saw it, Dr. I promise I did. But I kept saying to myself, I think I can fix everybody. And you know how we say, well, I can fix them. I can get, you know.
I didn't know men. I did not know until this very moment that men felt that same way. I
Yeah,
I always thought that was a woman thing. We want to fix him. Men do it too.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
I can fix it, the situation. It ain't that bad. It could be, it's just
Yeah.
like, a mechanic, I can make it work. I can make this car start by doing this right. So we try to fix things. So, and I'm not gonna say all men, but most of us do. We try to, I can fix it. But, and we don't want to get out of, and I would just be honest with you, didn't want to get out of a relationship. I like, man, I'm comfortable with this, but do I need to take this?
Mm, those are two total
Interesting.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We comfortable in being uncomfortable. You know that, right?
Yeah, we talk about it all the
We,
time. We call them habits
yeah,
though. You know, habits are habits. You got good habits, you got bad habits. And so you can be in something
yeah,
that's not so good, but it's your routine, it's your habit, and what is what
yeah,
you become
yeah,
accustomed to. I'd like to know
yeah.
in your classes if there are um, people that were the abusers. Are people there to talk about what they've done in terms of abusing others? And are they there to get help in any of the classes that
Oh yeah,
that you've had and what that sounds like and what that looks like. And, you know, is it a long process? I think Dr. West is saying we're on the verge of a break. So I kind of like to know what that looks like when we come back from break. We will be right back on 94.7 FM. We'll be back in a moment.
Okay.
Oh.
And we're back on 94.7 FM. We are here with Dr. Nicole West and Kevin Phipps. We are talking about domestic violence. And you were going to tell us a little bit about the abusers that you work with and what types of, you know, I guess strategies that you guys implement with these folks that are trying to get help and maintain control as abusers. Mm-hmm.
So, my thing was getting to the core. Why do you abuse? What's your reason? And I'll share with you most of the cases because of something that they were taught. So, and when I was teaching, it was a 27-week program. So the first week, people, it usually about the 8th or 9th week, I'm kind of getting to them. And then by week 12, I start seeing them opening up and really, kind of addressing their issue, what caused it. But what's amazing is that when the new guys come in and the ones who've been in there 13 or 14 weeks, they would check the new guys when they were like, man, come on, tell the truth, man. Because at the end of the day, we're gonna hold you. We used to do a responsibility and accountability plan. Because you got to be responsible for your action.
Yeah.
And we've had some guys that come in there and try to sugarcoat it like they didn't do anything. So what I would do is amazing when they get to talking, and I say, so that's your truth? They be like, yeah, this is what happened. I said, well, do I need to read this affidavit? I said, because what you're saying and what this paper is saying is totally different. And I said, nah. And then on top of that, if it's any kind of physical injuries, and he had one guy, I mean, he just shot up the whole house, and he tried to deny there was no weapons involved. So I mean, they're gonna come in, they're gonna be in denial. But the best part I like about my groups when I was teaching it, that the guys who were really getting it, after we poured into them, they will hold those new guys and they'll put them in check. So, and they'll let you know, man, you can't come in here and BS Mr. Phipps because he gonna get to you. And believe it or not, getting to that core, I've seen men cry. I mean, just break down because, what they thought they were doing. And I used to always ask, I had one guy, and my question used to be, especially if they had children, if they had girls. And I would say, would you want to date a man? And that would get them to thinking. And when they say no, and I said, well, think about it. You don't want one to date like you, but you're abusing their mother.
Right.
So they was like, well, it's something I need to change about myself because, you think about the attraction your daughter gonna get. If that's what she's seeing, she might attract that kind of man. And then what are you gonna do?
Wow.
But you don't think that's something that abusers naturally think about? Like, I mean, it may be after the fact and after they've done the abuse, but like, man, I wouldn't want nobody to put their hands on my daughter, or that might be my karma, for somebody to put their hands on my daughter.
It's half and half, because you have some guys say, well, man, they better not put their hand on my daughter. I said, but you put your hands on their mom.
Right. Somebody else's daughter.
Yeah, somebody. I said, so she got a dad and she got a mom. I said, so, but you don't want, it's okay for you to whoop that mom. Let them to think. I said, because how you think her daddy feel that if she tell him that you the one being abused? So you have to get that abuser to think. And like I said, when I talk about getting to the core, I mean breaking it all the way down, and getting them being accountable and being responsible for what they do. Because a lot of times it's easy to blame somebody else for what you've done,
Oh yeah.
But you got to look within yourself. And to thy own self be true.
Yeah. So I imagine it's probably extremely difficult to help someone unlearn some behavior, right? You know the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. If this is what you've seen growing up, and this is what you've the pattern you've kind of reinforced being in relationship to relationship, and you know maybe beat everybody, is it hard to get them, after they've accepted accountability, is it hard to get them to change their behavior?
somewhat, I could tell guys, and sometimes I would like, you can't say you complete the class, you attended, because you'll never complete it.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what I'm gonna say, okay, you're not gonna abuse it. You never complete it. You have attended all the required classes, but I've had guys that had to come back because I wouldn't, felt like they hadn't did what they need to do, especially when we talk about the responsibility and accountability plan, because I wasn't gonna sign my name on a piece of paper when they go back to court and say they was okay. So, no, I don't do that. And the guys would tell you, man, he was a hard guy, but he make you think. And it's ironic. I used to have a lot of ministers that would take the class. And you talking about
I don't find that ironic.
Huh?
I really don't find that ironic.
But the ministers were some of the most difficult ones to teach.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, because think of their statue, I'm pastor so-and-so.
Yeah.
And I had one of them tell me, well, the Bible says a woman should be submissive.
The Bible says
that
what?
same Bible, yeah. I said, but did it also that the man had to be submissive to somebody? I said, you want that woman to be submissive. Who are you submissive to?
Right.
Who are you following?
And you know what? I think that's why some women have an issue with the word submission, because some men have the wrong definition of it. It is not that me being submissive means you get to push me around, call me names, smack me in the head, give me one good whooping a year. That's not what submission means. But I think, and so men, have a problem with women who won't, quote, submit, but that's because they have the wrong definition of it.
It's totally not a dirty word. As a matter of fact, I often say, and I think you've heard me say, Dr. West, like, that's the man I want, right? That I want to submit to in the right way, like in the healthy way, right?
Yeah, you want to submit to him, but he got to submit to somebody too.
Yes.
So if he's not following anybody, so I wouldn't want no woman to follow me, and I'm not following somebody.
Right, and you don't even know where you're going.
Yeah, you don't know where you're going. A lot of people, it's crazy, but it's that's the way it is, and it's but I always say the ministers and police officers were two different. Yeah. Think about it. I can control the situation. Yeah. And so I've dealt with men in different and I always say pastors and businessmen who have their money, because they control with the economics.
Yeah. I didn't even really think, consider police officers, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
They can't,
especially the controlling piece.
Yeah. They can't turn it off when they get home.
Yeah, they can't.
Wow.
Yeah, well, some of them can't, but you got some. My best friend is a police officer. He's gentle as a bear. He's a nice guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a question about what we are teaching our young men, because you brought up that you were raised to never put your hands on a woman, and most of us are raised that way, that if you are a man, no matter what that woman does, you don't put your hands on her.
Yes.
So I don't know, does that lead to a man then ending up in an abusive relationship? What does a man who was taught that do in the event that he ends up in an abusive relationship, when he's taught that no matter what this woman does, you don't put your hands on her, you don't? How do we teach the right thing so that people, men or women, are not being abused?
Well, I always say a way of thinking man. What I mean by the way of thinking man, because he's gonna think everything out. And my thing, what are the consequences? If I do this, what would happen? And a lot of times that we have to teach our boys, and disagreements are good. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good to have a disagreement.
Yeah.
But I could disagree with you without calling you other name than Dr. West or Dr. Shaw. We can have a disagreement, even without raising my voice.
Yeah.
So we have to teach people. I talked to some school board members years ago, and I offered to volunteer to go into schools and teach anger management. I said volunteer.
Wow.
And never did hear anything back. They always swept it under the rugs. And the reason why I said that, because when I've driven past middle schools and you see young boys, and it's crazy to see young boys. I've seen little boys snatch a little girl. And so it's some issues at home that, why would you want to do that? It's crazy, but I wanted to teach them how to disagree, to argue without getting physical.
Yeah.
That's why I was on the debate team. When you're in the debate, you argue, but nobody's getting up, throwing books and nothing like that, but you're just debating your point. And nothing get beyond that.
Yeah. I was watching a video of, I don't know, somebody sent it to me, but I couldn't believe what I saw. It probably was a middle school class, and there was a young lady fighting with this little boy in her classroom, and she was hitting him and smacking him, and he was sitting in the chair kind of trying to cover his head, and then she spit on him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying with everything he had not to put his hands on this little girl. And then when she spit on him, I think that was it for him. He had just had enough, and he got up and he hit the little girl back. And I'm thinking, I have a little boy, and I don't even know what I would want to tell him to do in that situation, but I do know that allowing somebody to just constantly go at you, and you're doing this in front of the entire class, and then you spit on this person. I don't know what I would tell him to do.
But Dr. West,
I do know. I'm lying. I do know. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, come on now. I know you.
I do know.
You know what you would tell him to do.
That person spit on me.
Oh my goodness.
And it took everything in me. I promise y'all. I said, the power of prayer. The Holy Ghost held that fist. But I walked away because, and when I tell people, it was like, man, how you not? That's the worst thing you can do. I said, yeah. I said, but I know, my teacher, my dad was in the back of my head. You don't hit a woman. And I'm like, man, but for somebody to do that to you, that's one of the worst things you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and maybe in the back of your mind, you knew that you were a trained fighter.
Yeah.
That if you, allowed yourself to unleash on this woman, it was going to be a really, really bad day.
Yeah.
But everybody has a breaking point.
Yeah. Well, I was 30 something when that happened. Now, even though my dad had taught me what he taught me, at 15, it might not have turned out that way.
Right.
Yeah. So, but even though, but even at 30 years old, I just still heard my dad's voice. You don't hit a woman.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is your advice? Let's talk about some of the warning signs, okay, of domestic violence. And then I want you to just tell the audience, give them some advice about if they are in fact, or, in an abusive relationship of any kind, because it doesn't have to be, romantically based relationships all the time. If they are, or if they think they are, if they think this might be abuse, then what they should do.
To be honest with, the first thing you should do is let somebody know. Because a lot of times, but it's got to be somebody that you can trust. And if it's that bad, where the abuse is bad, where you need to get out, but have you a plan, like we talked about.
So when you say it's somebody that you can trust, though, when you say it's got to be somebody you can trust, like what does that look like too? Because I mean, if I'm just thinking, if Nicole were to tell me somebody's beating on her, right?
Yeah.
Are you saying that I gotta be quiet about it too?
No, what I'm saying, if Nicole was to come to you and say, this is what's going on, let you know, and then offer her, some kind of help. Even if it's just coming over your house, sitting for 2 or 3 hours, that's help. And people don't look at it. And then as you're doing that, making a plan, because if Nicole can't leave, Nicole gonna have somewhere to go, correct?
Mm.
She's got to have somewhere to go and have so. And when I say talk to someone, because you can't tell everybody your business, Dr. Shaw, you know that. Because before you know it, your business will be on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And
Right.
if I'm in an abusive situation, and because the abuser more than likely knows some of your friends. So
Mm.
you have to be careful on who you share the information among your group. So and it has to be done. Now if it get to the point where it's happening right now, your first step is to notify law enforcement. Hey, I'm not gonna tell you not to call the police, because if you getting abused, getting physically abused right then and there, I'm not gonna tell you, well, go call Dr. Shaw, and no, call law enforcement first, and then you work your way from there. But if it's something, even if emotional abuse, have somebody to talk to, a person that you can speak with, because I always, I had a person that I could talk to when I was going through my situation, and that person was very helpful, because I needed somebody to listen to me. And sometimes listening is all this what you need.
Yeah. Some of the can you tell us if this is, if someone's listening and they're like, this is happening to me, should I start thinking of a plan? If someone is stalking you, right? Your current or your former um, relationship, if they're stalking you, harassing you, coming to places uninvited, is that a warning sign for you?
Yeah.
Is that a
Now
red flag?
if they're stalking you, and if they're coming on your job, I would let the people on my job know.
Mm-hmm.
And also I would also either, you can file a stalking report, but I would let law enforcement know, because see,
Yeah.
that stalking is real dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know.
so I ask you about, what does it look like when you say go to somebody you can trust? Because I worked with a young lady once that was being abused,
Mm-hmm.
and she had two small kids, and she asked me one day if she could go to my house because she had stayed in her car the night before. And I had this sensitivity to the children, so I allowed her to come to my house that day.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, he showed up. He was driving by my house. I don't know. He probably watched us when we left the job. He was driving by
Yeah.
my house. I had my own kids to worry about too.
Yes.
And then the next day, this man literally showed up at our workplace, and they had to do a lockdown at the building. It was just the craziest thing I'd ever experienced, right? But it was me trying to help someone in a situation, and I found myself feeling like, I was gonna need help too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why you have to get law enforcement involved in a situation. Like, I worked with a lady that was getting abused at home, and one of my coworkers said, well, Kevin, you need to follow her home and go in the house with her. I said, well, you want me to follow her home? Her husband is jumping on her every day. I said, no, what needs to happen is, as she leave work, she needs to call law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
because too many times people have gone in trying to break up a fight, and the innocent bystander gets hurt. I remember years ago, I stopped my car because I saw this man beating this woman. I was in South Memphis. I stopped my car and was going, help the lady. That lady looked at me, cussed me out, and said, leave me alone.
Wow.
So, I was like,
So
so
it's hard to maybe to
yeah,
intervene on some of these situations.
yeah.
We are unfortunately out of time. This was such a great topic. We're going to have you come back. But thank you
Yes.
so much for shedding some light on this topic for us. Dr. Shaw, you got any last words?
My last words are, if you guys feel like you are in an abusive relationship, reach out to somebody, a family member, a friend. Try to reach out to someone, as Mr. Phipps said, that you think you can trust, because it's really serious if somebody is abusive, whether it's mental, or physical. Okay.
Right.
And even the financial abuse, because we have to have our basic needs met in life, right, to live a productive life. So please reach out to somebody. We thank you guys for coming back every Saturday to share this hour with us, and we look forward to seeing you right here, same chat channel, same chat time on next Saturday, right here on Doctor to Doctor in the Chat Room. We will see you then.